Well, we're going to check back in with a couple of our favorite guests and thinkers and freedom fighters on your behalf. That is, of course, Naomi Wolf and Meryl Nass. Dr. Nass, you can follow her at Nass Meryl, Meryl. She says the only way H5N1, so-called bird flu, endangers humans is if a lab does gain-of-function research. We're going to get into that. And with Naomi, of course, she lives with an intelligence expert. We're going to talk a little bit about what's lurking in that arena, so to speak. But more importantly, we're going to talk about this. We're sort of dedicating ourselves at least a little bit to the bird flu today. The enthusiasm that our government seems to have for culling birds, for vaccinating humans, for creating a new H5N1 vaccine and making everybody take it. I don't understand where that's coming from, but we'll look into that right after this. Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say. Joint and muscle pains are exhausting and frustrating, but I've got a over-the-counter medication I'll introduce you to that provides great relief using the power of, check it out, chili peppers. Capsidin is made with a proprietary formula that contains no non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents, no opioids, no anesthetic or steroid, nothing, no chance for addiction, no side effects, no chance it's going to interact with other medication you might be taking. Capsidin contains capsaicin, which is the substance in chili peppers that burns your tongue. That gives you that burny feeling. And of course, I've recommended capsaicin creams to patients over the years, but other capsaicin creams burn your skin. That's what makes capsidin so unique. In clinical trials, capsidin has actually been demonstrated not to burn.
I've been using capsidin to relieve my pain in my hands and my wrist from carpal tunnel syndrome and arthritis. The results have been amazing. I use it every day during my show, and I highly recommend it.
Get the pain relief you need from various sources, even backache, sprains, bruises even. Order now at capsidin.com/Drew to get a 15% discount plus free shipping. That is CAPSADYN, capsidin.com/DREW. Capsaicin is well known to be a useful anesthetic, and this is one that does not burn your skin. Also, every week, users of Upside are earning over $1 million cash back. That's right, Upside users are getting $1 million cash back. The free Upside app gets you cash back on a daily essential like gas, groceries, dining, all at over 100,000 places. And yes, it is real cash back. No confusing rewards, points, or credits. Just money you can transfer straight to your bank account. Users can earn 3 times more cash back with Upside than any other product, including loyalty programs and credit card rewards. All you do is claim an offer on Upside for whatever you're buying. Pay as usual with a credit card or debt card. Follow the steps in the app and you get paid. Top Upside earners are making as much as $300 a month. Find out how much you could earn. Click the link in the description to download Upside and use code Dr. Drew, DRDREW, to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. That would be useful here in Southern California, that's for sure. Or visit drdrew.com/upside to claim this offer. One more time, drdrew.com/upside, UPSIDE, promo code DRDREW. All right, let's get to our guest. Of course, you guys know Naomi Wolf. She's been here multiple times. You can follow her on X at Naomi R. Wolf. Also, do check out her newest book, Facing the Beast, Courage, Faith, and Resistance in a New Dark Age. Meryl Nass will be here in a few minutes as well. We'll get her in here in a while, but first we're going to talk to one of the founders of DailyClout.io, Naomi Wolf. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Drew. It's always such a pleasure to speak with you and your lovely wife.
So what, we always love to catch up with what's on your mind. I keep thinking, if people don't know you, or they know you from your books years back, they might have trouble making a connection between the books you were writing about women 20 years ago and where you are now. When I first got to know you, that was my first question. So, and that has come up for me a few times. That's why I'm starting here when I talk to people about my enthusiasm for your efforts. And explain how it's all the same for you.
Thank you. Well, I'm guessing that what you're referring to, and thank you for having the longer memory of my career. A lot of people just know me at certain times, over time. I think you're referring to the fact that for about 35 years, I was kind of a fixture in legacy media and on the left for writing about feminism and women's issues. I was sort of a well-known third wave feminist, and that was my primary focus. And then I moved into civil liberties with books like The End of America, Give Me Liberty. And to me, that continuum was really clear. I was interested in personal freedom, personal dignity, civil rights, human rights, the right of everyone to live out his or her fullest potential. And then came the pandemic, and the lockdowns. And then I did what I've always done, which is ask questions about bodily integrity.
Wait a minute, a journalist asking questions? What a crazy thought, a journalist investigating things and asking questions of authorities. What? Where did that come from? What a strange thing.
And I'm not sure if I'm talking over you.
Nope. Keep going.
Right.
There's just a slight delay.
So we're getting a little choppy. There's a little delay. Don't worry. If you start talking, I'll back away. So we'll always defer to you. But the choppiness makes it a little more awkward than usual. So keep going, though.
No worries. So just to wrap up the question of kind of how are they related, after 2021, I began to report, as your lovely clips show, on harms especially to women and children from the mRNA injection. And then this project unfolded of these 3,250 doctors and scientists we oversaw, who've now issued 104 reports based on the Pfizer documents released under court order by successful lawsuit in the custody of the FDA. And these have documented the greatest crime against humanity in recorded history. And so it's all on a continuum because people have a right not to be murdered by the state. People have a right not to be lied to or sterilized by the state. People have a right, according to our laws, to have disclosure about what's in the medications they're putting into their bodies, and to not have their elected officials coerce them or traffic their bodies, and not have corporations coerce them or traffic their bodies. I'm just going to pick up my dog so that he does not bark.
Okay.
So that is how it is all the same. That is how it is all the same fight, essentially, even though I got kind of ousted from my perch in the legacy media, and now I'm a kind of politically homeless independent journalist. Here you go, sweetheart. My wonderful husband will take the dog now.
And so,
Hey, Brian.
Yeah, hi to Brian. And so that whole process of becoming, let's call it what it is, a freedom fighter. Can we just call it that? I mean, I think that's what we're talking about here. For fighting for freedom, it's all the same thing. And the fact that it's interesting to me that with the work I used to do, is Naomi frozen there for us?
I'm trying to figure that out right now. I was counting and she didn't blink, so I think she is frozen. She's coming back.
But she can probably hear me.
Yeah, she might be able to hear you. She might be refreshing her Zoom right now.
Okay. And so what I was going to say is that there's something that has occurred to me of late, which is that I spent a lot of time trying to cast off the yoke of the right. Doing radio all those years, being assailed by various groups. If you remember the moral majority, remember the religious right, you remember the Tea Party. How dare I advocate for emergency contraceptives? How dare I advocate for, at the time I was advocating for the HPV vaccine. Anything that made sexual health more safe for young people, I was assailed by the right. And what drove me crazy about the criticism I was getting back then from the right It was not founded on any even basic understanding of the science. They just didn't understand what they were even talking about and would assail because they didn't like the sound of things. And then we kind of got through that. And now you and I both are getting assailed from the left for daring essentially to question the centralization of authority for a variety of really health functions. And that we've known forever that your most effective unit is a well-informed patient and a well-trained caring physician. That's your best unit. Anything you take away from that unit, you are diminishing the quality of healthcare. What is going on the left, do you think? And can you hear me still now? You hear me all right, Naomi?
I hear you, but I can't see you. I hear you. Oh, there we go.
That's okay.
I hear you.
Hearing is good because we see you.
Choppily. Go ahead. You're saying what is going on the left.
I was saying, what do you think is going on? How can they go from the party of and I pointed this out. I don't think you have this, Caleb, handy, but the rallying cry of the left from the 60s, 70s, even in the 80s was Peter Fonda in that one film in front of a judge where the man was looking down on these young kids, and the judge, a white guy in a skinny white tie, 50-year-old male, says, "What is it you want to do?" And Peter Fonda says, "We want to be free. We want to ride. We want to get high. We want to do what we want to do, man." And I was like, okay, that's the left of my entire life. Now it's, no. We want you to listen to these people in Washington, of all places, or let's even bring it over to Switzerland or Belgium. Let's centralize it over there, and make you listen to those guys that I don't know who they are or what their training is. They're not physicians. How did we get here, do you think? Oh no, lost her again. She froze. I was just going to say, if you can hear me, it's how did we get here?
Yeah. Well, I hope you can hear me. Yeah.
We do.
Well, I think that's a really complicated question, but I think there's been kind of a 30-year march from liberalism to actual Marxism. And of course, I'm very much influenced, as I've said before, by my husband and his many decades of work in the intel community on this issue, because I am persuaded that China and kind of global Marxism, really, which I thought was laid to rest with, the red diaper generation and the hearings about communism in the 1950s. But I am persuaded that it is not dead, and that they've been trying to subvert our institutions, subvert our elected officials, really subvert our culture, weaken and destabilize our culture for 30 years, really culminating in this administration, which I think is co-opted by China and the World Economic Forum, a kind of globalist cadre trying to destroy America, right? And I've said before, I think these injections are bioweapons. They're manufactured by China, distributed by China. They target Western Europe and North America specifically in a way that they don't the rest of the world. But this also has an impact. This kind of campaign has an impact on the left, because I don't recognize the curricula that are being taught anymore. I was an undergraduate in the 80s, and we still read Western classics. Now it's racist to read the Western classics, right? Our history's been erased, and a kind of collectivist discourse has been really systematically put in place to take the place of the classical liberals' individualist discourse, right? Freedom is about the individual, but the whole discourse so prevalent during COVID is you have to protect the community, you have to protect the group, your individual rights don't matter. That's a Marxist social construct. And young adults are really being targeted with, straight up Marxist messages, and so are elected officials. Like DEI is kind of a Marxist premise that the individual doesn't matter, merit doesn't matter. It's only kind of collective identities and collective power blocks that matter. These are not American ideas. These aren't Martin Luther King's ideas. So all of that was very deliberate, but someone made a point that I think has some truth to it, which is kind of psychosexual almost, that especially that the worst the worst offenders are white women. Yeah, I think we can just agree about this kind of woke ideology and rigidity. And someone made the point that kind of the attack on quote unquote toxic masculinity, right? The premise, which is not feminism, it's some weird attack on the West that, there's something wrong with men for being men. It's created a generation of men who are not comfortable being masculine or assertive or protective of women and children. And what that led to was a group of women, privileged women especially, who were so eager to embrace authoritarianism. They were so eager to submit because they felt out of control. Like, I'm not saying women have to be put under control. That's not what I'm saying. But it really resonated.
No, I get what you're saying. That's really very, very interesting. Is that it's the concept of containment, right? When people feel emotionally out of control, they will often rely on their partners, for instance, to contain them, to feel glued together. We all do some of that, but women tend to do a little more of that than men. And if you don't have a partner around that can help you contain, I suppose your theory is, and it's kind of interesting, the government has to contain you, or somebody has to contain you, or some centralized authority needs to contain you. And it is so fascinating. And yet this thing has continued to roll along. And I think we're entering a phase now where I'm seeing women both complain like crazy on social media, where are the men, where are the men, woe is me, and at the same time seeing the sort of this uptick of sort of female coaches, I want to call them, or something, or women commentating on exactly what you're talking about, saying, no, I can say with a full voice, I would like a man to be masculine and male, and here's why. I'm seeing a lot of that, which before that would have been repressed in some way. And by the way, I'm seeing it, which is kind of interesting, I'm seeing it on TikTok, which people worry is a Chinese influenced platform. I see it on Instagram too, but there's something shifting. Corolla always says that what we're going to end up with is safe spaces and octagons. Like, you're going to just have these people that, because you're pushing people in two different directions. People that are just masculine men are going to hang out over here, and they're going to get angry and more sort of siloed, and they're going to be they're going to head towards the octagon and fight it out there. And the other population is going to run for the safe places. Yeah. And the states are going to divide that way. And if you look at the difference between Florida and California now, it's really already happening. Michael Malice made this same point. He felt that this was going to happen, that there was going to be sort of a dispersal of the states. And, especially it seems like that's going to happen when the horrible policies of places like California start to really create economic distress when places like Florida are thriving.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, the algorithm can do that to us, right? It can feed, there's so much messaging to young women, especially about, you don't need a man, you're better off without a man, kick them to the curb, kick him to the curb. This is your revenge trip to Costa Rica with your girlfriends. A young woman said to me recently, why do rom-coms end in marriage? And in our generation, or probably for all of recorded history before now, it's kind of self-evident that a happy ending is you find the love of your life, you marry and have children, right? But now that's no longer, and can you think of a rom-com that has ended in a happy marriage recently? I really can't, right? The glamorization is all about her surviving, them going their different ways. It's fascinating. And a lot of songs, I literally can't remember the last time I heard a pop song in a woman's voice, which was a love song. Men still sing love songs. I miss her. No one's like her. Young women don't. They're not hearing those songs. And I think that's very intentional. And so there's this messaging, and the algorithm kind of is enforcing this, right? To drive women over in that direction, men over in that direction. They can't possibly communicate with each other. And certainly the algorithms also drive red America to think that blue America is a bunch of crazy baby killers who don't know what a woman is, and blue America is getting stereotypes of red America that all they want to do is, turn them into Stepford wives and chain them to, the kitchen. And none of it is true, but we've lost those civic spaces, like going to church or going bowling, right? Where we used to actually encounter real men, real women, real, conservatives, real liberals, and kind of get past those labels and have real relationships. So it is a genuinely fragmented society, which is exactly where our enemies want us to be.
I believe this generalization is factually true, which is that Shakespeare, all the Shakespeare plays, generally, and this may apply to Greek as well, Greek plays. If it's a tragedy, it ends in murder or death. If it's a comedy, it ends in a marriage. That is just all's well that ends well. All's well that ends well is a marriage. That's what ends it. All's well that ends well. And it's sort of the summary of the title. Ending well would be a marriage, as far as history would determine. So before we bring Dr. Nass in here, I want to talk about this, sort of set up and talk a little bit with you about this move towards the bird flu. Dr. Peter Hotez made some comments I want to play for you recently. I think it was on a television program that got people very concerned, and reasonably so. It seems so extraordinary that we're running there. But let's take a look at that, Caleb, if you could play that for us.
The health sector doesn't know what to do, because this is now first and foremost a political problem. And what I've said to the Biden administration is the health sector can't solve this on its own. We're going to have to bring in Homeland Security, the Commerce Department, Justice Department to help us understand how to do this. And I've said the same I met with Dr. Tedros last month in Geneva, WHO, the Director General, to say, I don't know that the World Health Organization can solve this on our own. We need the other United Nations agencies, NATO. This is a security problem because it's no longer a theoretical construct or some arcane academic exercise. 200,000 Americans died because of anti-vaccine aggression, anti-science aggression.
When he says that, it's so interesting to me, because where was he during H1N1 when 300,000 people died? That was about 14 years ago. And the Obama administration did nothing, and that was fine. We made our way through it. Why wasn't he freaked out about that? So it's just so we need to bring in NATO to enforce vaccine policies. Is that really where we're going? What are you saying, Naomi?
Yeah, they tried to, weaponize the state against a population 2021, 2022, into 2023. They tried vaccine ID cards. They tried, physically restraining people. They tried ejecting people from public spaces. And none of that worked. About a third of Americans, probably more, because I don't trust CDC data, refused to get vaccinated at all. And so they failed, right? They incentivized, they threatened, they delicensed people, people lost jobs. But essentially he and his evil little monstrous demonic colleagues who are trying to, create a control grid, as some people put it, they failed in that regard. So now what have they got? They've got military, and so they're trying to militarize medical dissent. They're trying to criminalize medical dissent. And so listen to his language. And I've made this case ever since I wrote The End of America, and I looked at how democracies turn into fascist states or totalitarian states. There's always this mission creep with language where free speech turns into violence, whether it's incitement or subversion, or in his case, he's coining some phrases that have probably been focus group tested, and there's probably a campaign with a global ad agency waiting in the works to release them. Anti-science aggression and anti-vaccine aggression. Well, that makes you and me, my friend, aggressors. Anti-science and anti-vaccine aggressors. So who's being aggressed? We're creating victims. He's claiming that we've killed 200,000 people through our anti-science aggression that makes us murderers. This is a brilliant rhetorical tactic to deflect from the fact that I'm saying that they're murderers, right? That they created a mass murder through these injections. So by doing this and then bringing in, it's like a mafia type threat, bringing in the Justice Department, Department of Homeland Security, NATO, right? Multiple layers of like federal law enforcement, meta federal law enforcement, global law enforcement, the UN, right? Meta national. Well, if he can get the UN to adjudicate our anti-science aggression, that transcends our rights under the Constitution that say, have a First Amendment right, for example, that's gone if it's NATO and the UN. The power, which is what goes to Meryl Nass, right? This is what they're trying to do all along by moving health policy to a transnational context. But he's basically serving as their little bitch. I'm sorry, I try to be nice, but that man is just so.
You have trouble with that, Naomi. You have trouble being nice. So it's interesting. I was talking to Sage Steele recently, and she, was forced to take a vaccine to take her job, and she described how violated she felt when she took the vaccine at that moment because she'd always been so careful about her bodily integrity, and she particularly is upset then, and even more so now, with the understanding that she really didn't have informed consent to go ahead with this. She was just forced into it, and given what she knows now, she doesn't think she would do it at all, forced or otherwise, and that we played that clip. Caleb, you put that clip. I don't know if you saw this. And there was violent rhetoric in response to it. She's not anti-vaccine. She wasn't saying don't take the vaccine. She was talking about bodily integrity and informed consent. I can't stand this anti-vaccine aggression and misinformation. Caleb, I don't know if did you see all that?
Yeah.
Did you see all that rhetoric?
Yes, I saw that, and I don't know if you noticed, but I saw her interview as so important that a couple of days ago I clipped out that 30-minute segment of just her interview and uploaded it up to your channels because it was so good. And if you want, I have a 60-second version of it right here.
All right, let's show you what we were talking about. And this created horrific aggression.
Dr. Drew had just come from the stupid grocery store pharmacy getting the shot. I get choked up because something in me changed at that moment, where I'd always had control of my body. And at that moment, I didn't. And in order to keep my job and support my family, and a job, by the way, that I loved, that dream since I was 11 years old, I was living it. So I just said, listen, I think it's sick and scary for any company to force their employees to do something like this. And that was the beginning of the end. And I will say this, I ended up filing a lawsuit because they suspended me while at the same time allowing my peers to go on ESPN platforms and speak about their politics. And my son in particular saw their mom not cower to Disney when I was scared to death and didn't have the money to fight them.
That story you just told us is something that should be laid down in the history book. And there we go. So, Naomi, I have to take a little break here. That's sort of a perfect way to roll into Dr. Nass joining us. We're going to talk a little more about the bird flu. We're going to talk more about where she's been at with interfering with the so-called international treaty around healthcare. And Naomi, I hope you'll stay with us. I'm hearing that your husband may be able to join us also at the top of the hour for a second to give us a primer on intelligence concerns. There's a lot going on in the world. I don't know that I've ever been quite this nervous and unhappy about things, but I'm trying to ignore it. But I know Brian won't let me, so that'll be something we'll do at the top of the hour. So, all right, everybody, we will take a little break. Please pay attention to the people that support us, and we really stand behind everything we play for you. So check it out. Many of us have not gotten over COVID. I'm not talking about the virus itself, but the response. We were flabbergasted by what the government could do to us. There is no telling what they might pull next time, and it's looking more like there will be a next time. So we all have to be what I call rationally ready. That's where the wellness company comes in. TWC is about access to physicians via telehealth, access to potentially life-saving medication. Years ago, having access to medication and telehealth might have seemed crazy, but now it seems crazy not to. Now, with claims that gain-of-function research have been done on the bird flu, I urge everyone to take control of their healthcare with the help of the Wellness Company. Go to drdrew.com/TWC for 10% off all their products, including the 4 medical kits, each of which has a different purpose. And we've added Tamiflu to one of them in case the bird flu does become a problem for humans. Be rationally ready. drdrew.com/TWC for 10% off. Of course, I'm a fan of the healthy aging supplement True Niagen. I've been taking it almost for a decade myself. This supplement boosts NAD, which your cells need to survive properly metabolically, and it goes down as we age. It does so with a nutrient called nicotinamide riboside, or NR, specifically patented form of NR called Niagen. It's the most efficient and trusted NAD booster. NAD can also play a role in reproductive health. Boosting NAD is recommended with prenatal vitamins for women over 30 looking to start a family. Here's Dr. Amy, also known as the Egg Whisperer, a highly influential specialist in this area.
That was when I said, this is amazing. I need every single person going through fertility to take it. I not only take it myself, my patients have shared stories. They took it and then they got pregnant naturally. And that's really my goal, is I want people to empower themselves with the tools so that they can get pregnant without my help.
True Niagen is an amazing NAD booster. You're going to want to add it to your reproductive health arsenal. And of course, it's in our family of Dr. Drew sponsors. Go to drdrew.com/True Niagen for 20% off your order. That is drdrew.com/True Niagen. Enter Dr. Drew at checkout for 20% off. I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins. And a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue, and we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15.
Dr. Drew said the best way to quit drinking is by going cold turkey, and he's a doctor, so why would you question doctors?
Dr. Drew called me unfixable.
Couple of quick things before I bring my guest back. You know, there's certain supplements that you really should avail yourself of. Fatty is one of them. True Niagen is another. I'll have some other stuff coming down the road to suggest to you guys. But the Fatty, I've got much more research coming for the benefits there. Keep an eye out for that. I'll be helping people stay abreast. I have doubled my dose on it. I'm so convinced. It's a fatty acid we are deficient in. It's important that we have it. That's that. And then on Niagen, True Niagen, Kat Timpf, we can now talk about, from Gutfeld, is pregnant. And she got pregnant. She'd been trying forever because we put her on True Niagen, which Dr. Amy had been saying.
She even froze embryos.
She had frozen embryos. They were having trouble. And I said, just try True Niagen. Pregnant very, very quickly. So to Amy's point, it really is a significant, and it's good for reduce aging effects and whatnot.
And congratulations to Kat Timpf and Kim.
And then finally, of course, our friends at TWC, they continue to be extraordinary. And we're going to talk about the bird flu in a second. We have put stuff in, we are trying to keep abreast of what seems to work from an antiviral standpoint if the bird flu should become a problem. And we're adding these things to some of our emergency kits. So let's bring Naomi Wolf.
Drew, are you excited to be a New York grandpa too? I mean, Kat's kind of like a daughter to you. So we're going to have a baby in New York and one here.
Right.
We're double grandparents.
One of our sons is having a child.
Our Uncle Drew.
And I need to bring Naomi on the screen because she just reacted to that. I don't think she knew. So you should have seen her reaction when you said
I know.
that.
So yes, that's We are going to be grandparents, which is the choke on it.
Awesome. Oh, that's wonderful. That's so great.
Thank you.
Makes me
I know,
happy
we're
that the
officially
race is
old.
going to continue. They didn't. They didn't.
I know, right? You're so right. I mean, this should be this. It's really. I have, I'm a biologist by training, and I have zero problem when people worry about what the meaning of life is and why are we here on Earth. I have zero problem saying that my purpose in its entirety was to move genes forward. That's my purpose. That's my biological purpose. And I'm perfectly fine to that. That sustaining the species is cool with me. And that was my job. And I feel like I've done so. But getting to grandchildren, actually, it turns out from an evolutionary standpoint, is an important step in making sure that things keep moving through. So let's get Dr. Nass in here. Speaking of biology, Dr. Nass was trained at MIT to begin with. Let me get her bio. She's, of course, a board-certified internist, 40 years of experience, nationally recognized an expert in epidemics, consultant with governments. You can follow her at Nass, N-A-S-S, Meryl, M-E-R-Y-L on X. And she has dooroffreedom.org. Welcome, Dr. Nass. Thank you for coming back.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Tell us about Door of Freedom before we mix this up here, the bird flu.
Sure. Door to Freedom. Door to
Door
Freedom.
to Freedom.
Yeah, it's a 501c3 I started last year to fight the WHO, basically. You remember we talked about that. The WHO had 2 treaties it was trying to bring forward that would have given the WHO enormous power whenever it declared a public health emergency of international concern. It could basically take over public health for the world. That was the goal. In addition, they wanted to create a library of potential pandemic pathogens, which is another way of saying biological warfare agents, and they would share them and they would be in control of them. So there were other, they wanted also a lot of surveillance, all kinds of surveillance, your medical records, your throat, your animals, etc. But
And you've had success. You've had success in
I
thwarting
think
it, yes? It seems like for the
as
moment.
successful as we could have been. We stopped. So the pandemic treaty did not go through, and the nations agreed to give it 12 more months. So they've had about 20 months to negotiate it so far before that meeting. And the international health regulations that were being massively amended, almost all the bad amendments got whittled out. So at the end, they passed something, but it had very little substance, apart from the encouragement to nations to surveil their citizens' social media, their online footprint, and to address. The word they finally came up with was address misinformation and disinformation, which of course every country is already doing one way or another. So, and governments seem to love having the imprimatur that they're doing what the WHO says when they're addressing misinformation, which I want to tell all your audience is not a crime. There is no such thing as misinformation and disinformation. It's speech. We're allowed to say whatever we want. It's not a crime. U.S. government and other governments would like to make it a crime. They have all kinds of names for it. They're calling it hate speech in some countries. But the First Amendment in the United States says we can say whatever we want.
You saw Dr. Hotez suggesting that we need to get the World Health Organization, NATO, Homeland Security, Justice Department involved in suppressing said free speech.
Exactly, because these people are totalitarians. He would like to control every vaccine that goes into your arm and perhaps control every piece of food that goes into your body because he thinks he knows best. Dr. Hotez has long worked on biological defense, which is another word for biological warfare. He has patented a lot of vaccines and products for this industry. So it is no wonder that he wants every manner possible to impose his will on the public, because the more vaccines we get, the better off he will be.
Wow.
And Dr. Nass, you, we see it, Caleb, what you're putting up there. But you put out, I linked to something, let me see what the name of it was, which I thought was the best review of the bird flu out there. The bird flu update in 6 minutes.
Oh, yeah,
Give us 2 minutes on that 6-minute update and what we should watch out for with the bird flu. What's going right, what's going wrong there?
Okay. So, there's lots of viruses around, and if you don't look for them, generally you don't even know they're there. People die, animals die, chickens die. We started looking at H5N1 bird flu 27 years ago, when it killed a handful of people in Hong Kong. And that was the first time anyone knew that this particular virus could kill anybody, or that people could even get it. In the 27 years since then, the WHO says it's killed a total of 463 people. And since the beginning of 2020, the WHO says it's only killed 8 people in the whole world. This is nothing to worry about. It has never spread person to person. It may or may not be killing a lot of chickens. We don't know, because as soon as they get a PCR test that's positive, all the chickens in that chicken house or that farm have to be culled. So the United States government has spent $500 million reimbursing farmers for the chickens that the U.S. government ordered to be killed to stop the spread of an H5N1 virus that now has affected 14 Americans, none of whom went into the hospital, none died, most of them just had pink eye conjunctivitis. It doesn't matter, because for over 20 years,
keep going.
The U.S. government and internationally, the WHO, Jeremy Farrar, who's the chief scientist at the WHO, Tony Fauci, have been spreading a narrative that the bird flu is very dangerous. And if you got it, it was, 463 people died. That's dangerous to a degree, but it's never caused a pandemic. As I said, no person-to-person spread. But the plan has been for over 20 years to make vaccines for bird flu. And there are other bird flu viruses, and they've made vaccines for those also. And now the time has come, and these institutions that are interested in globalism and totalitarian approaches to public health have started saying out loud that it's time to think about when we give humans the bird flu vaccine. And there are a number of them. There are at least 6 in the United States that have been developed. There are more in Europe. We have stockpiles of at least 2 different bird flu vaccines. And we did this starting in 2007, believe it or not.
Have they been tested?
They've been tested to a small extent. The first one was only tested in 103 people. And during that trial, 1 died, 1 had a stroke, 1 had breast cancer, and 1 had a bleeding disorder. So they stopped testing that one.
Was it a mRNA platform or a traditional platform?
It was an ordinary platform, eggs, chicken eggs. Second vaccine was Glaxo, 2013, and these were licensed. These have been given a license by FDA. That was a Glaxo with an ASO3 novel squalene adjuvant. That one they tested in over 1,000 people, and there were problems with that one too. Then they went on to another one. This is Seqirus. It's made in dog kidney cells in a factory built for the purpose in Holly Springs, North Carolina, that the taxpayer paid $500 million for. And that one also contains a novel squalene-containing adjuvant, MF59. And the U.S. government has ordered 4.8 million doses of that one. The Europeans have ordered almost an identical vaccine. It's actually an H5N8.
I'm going to stop you and a couple things. One, so the 2 earlier vaccines were fully licensed. Would not be under emergency use authorization. They would be fully available, even though the side effect profile was concerning. But at least we can do. I'm trusting they were properly done in studies. We can do informed consent if we suggest that to somebody. But this persistent flu with a relatively, hang on a second, but I know you're going to disagree with that, but my point is going to be that this persistent preoccupation with this virus tells the story of biowarfare. There's just no other interpretation of this. Why would you be so preoccupied with this virus unless somebody was screwing around with it? And I thought that when they started getting alarmed by what was going on with the chicken farmers here, because there was nothing to be alarmed. I thought, oh, they must be alarmed because they're messing with the virus itself. And now you're telling me a story that I did not know that is the footprint of how governments chase biowarfare potential. There it is.
Yes. Yes. And in fact, there are many chicken viruses that can transmit to humans. There are at least 5 or 6 that have in the past, didn't transmit person to person, and governments have made model vaccines, prototype vaccines for many of them already. So when I looked at a list of bird vaccines that the WHO compiled just for like the last 6 years, there were about 30 or 40 different prototype vaccines for all these different bird flu viruses. So and in fact, the US government, those 3 that got licensed were all H5N1. All of them had safety problems. And now it seems the US government and Europe are moving on to an H5N8, so a different neuraminidase. And
I saw that.
That's what they are wanting to roll out. They have rolled it out in Finland for 10,000 people starting in June.
So I want to bring Naomi back in. And Naomi, I was just thinking that every time I talk to you, I feel like I need to apologize for being as sexist as I was and being so dismissive about menstrual irregularity. It really is so disturbing to me that it really is. It's
guilt, Dr. Drew.
Anyway, it was super sexist. It was super dismissive, super pathetic, and it's an embarrassment that I was that way. But there's probably other things.
You need to apologize to me too.
I do apologize to you. I apologize to all women for it's your big.
He liked the vaccine too. Remember, you liked the vaccine.
Well, liked. Well, that's kind of what I want to talk about, because liked is, I find myself very mixed as the information unrolls here. Particularly, I'm thoroughly convinced that the spike protein is the toxic pathogenic mechanism, both in COVID and from the vaccine, and that we've made a spike factory vaccine is just insane to me. It's insane. I mean, if you're 85 years old, it's worth the risk to you. Fine. 90, fine. But 17-year-old male or 40-year-old female, I don't get it. But I'm sitting around and ruminating a bit, and I'm still thinking about the platform. And I know, Naomi, you've had very serious concerns about the mRNA platform and the lipid nanoparticles and whatnot. Where has that evolved for you now? You're worried about lipid nanoparticles deposition in the uterus and the endometrium and in the ovaries, but these were all kind of, I don't know, they were concerns, but I don't know that we really substantiated them, or have we? You tell me where we're at today.
Okay, my head explodes once again.
Yes.
So abundantly confirmed. In fact, I don't mean to call you out, except I will just now, because unfortunately,
that's what I want. That's why I bring it up. That's why I bring it up, because it's not that, it's not the lexicon, the literature is kind of going back and forth, and as I know, the literature is very adulterated. So I want you to straighten me out.
I mean, the literature going back to before the pandemic isn't ambiguous. It's been known for 10 years that lipid nanoparticles, well, and you can confirm this too, Dr. Nass, if you like, or contradict it from your knowledge base, but 10 years they've known that lipid nanoparticles degrade human reproductive function. And they do that by the mechanism of lipid nanoparticles, which is so creepy. Lipid nanoparticles traverse membranes. They traverse every membrane in the human body.
Everything.
They kind of stabilize the human body. They just, and what we found, Dr. Robert Chandler, one of our experts, found, confirming something that was found a year previously, that in the Pfizer documents, it shows that the lipid nanoparticles don't stay in the deltoid. They get into every organ in the human body.
For sure. Well established. Yes.
Brain and spleen, exactly. So there's nothing ambiguous about this. And when you think about human reproduction, the fact that they're traversing the placenta, confirmed we're getting premature babies. We have dramatic rises in miscarriage rates. There are 1 million missing babies in Western Europe, babies that haven't been born, according to Igor Chudov. We know the mechanism because the babies can't get enough oxygen or food in utero because of the compromised status of this barrier, which is the uterus holding the baby, the placenta. Thank you. And then our Amy Kelly found that the lipid nanoparticles degrade the membrane holding the testes. And so they degrade the Sertoli cells and the Leydig cells, which are the factories of masculinity, masculine hormones. So we don't even know if the babies whose moms were vaccinated will grow up to develop into normal adult males with secondary sex characteristics. But what I want to ask people, like, with all due respect, Dr. Robert Malone, who, rightly claims to have been in on the creation of these mRNA injections in terms of the COVID injection, is what were you thinking? Because it's been known for so long, it's so well established that lipid nanoparticles degrade human sexual function. I mean, there are studies right now. People have to Google lipid nanoparticles, human sexual function. They'll see studies going back to 2017 and earlier showing that they do.
No, you did not. You did not disappoint me, because last time we had this conversation, you were sort of saying, we've seen this, we've seen that. Now you're saying it is so, right. and I take your word for that. But Dr. Nass, certainly you see the literature that I see going back and forth, and I just sort of sit and, well, oh God, what do I do with this? How do I reconcile this? The opinions are so different and wildly all over the place. And let me defend myself a little bit about liking the vaccine. I did not know any of what Naomi just educated us about. And it was an emergency, and I was willing to tolerate a certain amount of risk in an emergency. And once it became increasingly clear that there was a really serious problem here, I was not okay with it. I have allowed my patients to get boosted if they wanted to, but I would always tell them I can't really do informed consent with you because I don't know what we're doing. Yeah, it's a whole different thing. I have elderly patients, and it's internal medicine practice, as you know, Meryl. Yeah. But help me reconcile. What can I do except sit and look at the back and forth in literature and go, okay, I'm going to wait, I guess, to reserve judgment on all of these platforms until we get a consensus, or are we never going to get a consensus?
Okay, so if you're now switching to platforms for vaccines in general, I think
our mRNA platform.
Okay, the mRNA does require a lipid nanoparticle or something else to protect the mRNA. So you've got a problem right there. But you also don't have an off switch. So in any other vaccine, any normal vaccine, traditional vaccine, you have a dose. You give a half a milliliter, right? You don't give 5 milliliters. You don't give 10 milliliters. You give a specific dose. When you give an mRNA vaccine, you're not giving a dose because you do not know how many cells that's going to get into. You don't know how much is going to be produced, and you don't know for how long. So you're actually required to have one of the 3 things that FDA requires from all drugs and vaccines is to have a specific dose, to know how much you're giving. And you can't know that with an mRNA platform. So I think the platform is just no good. In the case of COVID vaccines, what we know is that a particularly toxic part of the virus was chosen. Now, I think the virus was made in a biowarfare lab and was made to be particularly toxic, and that multiple areas of the RNA in the virus are in fact, synthetic and intended to cause autoimmune effects, to affect our immune function, and to do other things such as get into more cells. So normally when you have a virus, you have a limited number of organs it goes into, or a limited number of species. It either goes into the lungs, but it doesn't also go into the kidney and also go into the liver. But in this case, COVID did all of that. It went everywhere.
Yeah.
And then when the vaccine was made, instead of the normal way of making a vaccine, which is you choose a non-toxic but immunogenic portion of the genome, they chose the most toxic part and didn't really look,
which is wild.
Immunogenic,
and kept pushing and keep pushing that. It's weird. It's so weird to me. That part I'm absolutely clear on. I mean, we have whole viral vaccines out there. Why aren't the vaccine is so important? Why aren't we pushing the whole viral vaccine?
Right. or a split. I mean, there are so many platforms, and yet the two that we wound up with was a DNA and an RNA, neither of which did we know how long it was going to be in effect for, and how much was going to be made. So
and to be clear, to your point, Dr. Nass, I a friend of mine who I interviewed on the show over the years a couple times who got severely vaccine injured, like disabled by it after the first booster I think he got. It's to your point that it's usually not the first one, it's the second or third when something happens that the off switch just does not come on. And we can correlate that kind of post-long COVID vaccine syndrome with continued production of antigen and continued production of antibody. You can see it, you can measure it. So it's clear that these long vax syndromes are caused by that vax not turning off. And we don't know why that happened or in whom that's going to happen.
Right, exactly. And how to deal with it.
So. Right.
What else was I going to say? The other thing is that the mRNA breaks down. No, so in the vial, it's a very friable, very delicate molecule. It breaks down. They added code, stop and start codes for transcribing it, translating it rather, and there may be other bits of RNA in that vaccine that are also intended to produce other proteins or other materials, peptides, whatever, that are harmful. I mean, if they did all these other things to harm us, if they knew they were going to harm us with the lipid nanoparticle and with the spike protein, why wouldn't they have added some other messenger RNA to harm us in other ways? Because small bits of RNA can turn genes on and off and have, many effects in the body. So, I don't think we've come to the end of figuring out what was the plan and why they want to keep giving this to us when everybody knows it doesn't make sense. And now why they want to start giving us bird flu vaccines for a disease that doesn't yet exist.
Right. And I know Naomi and your husband, Brian, has a sinister explanation. Go ahead.
I mean, you could say it's sinister, or you could say it's kind of well-informed by history. I mean, people have tried to invade other people's countries for as long as there's been recorded history, and biowarfare goes back to, tribes catapulting diseased animals over the walls of walled cities. I mean, 4,000 years before the birth of Christ. So, yeah, Brian's and my analysis kind of dovetails. When my original research found that the injection was made, manufactured, the IP was transferred to China, and that China had opened 14 manufacturing centers in Western Europe and 11 in the United States. And so it was in control of basically what was going into your arm. And they're our existential enemy. As Brian says, they want our land, they want our water resources, they want our energy grid, they want our food supply, they don't want our population, right? So what happens when you keep injecting people with something damaging? What we see all around us, that the existing American population is getting sick. According to Ed Dowd, 1 million people a month, they're identifying newly as disabled. There's excess deaths, and people aren't well. They're just not well. Even if they're not dead or disabled, they're not well. And then coming in over the border are 18 to 20 million people who are not being vaccinated, who come from totalitarian countries or who come from enemy countries, many of them, not like any refugees or immigrants anywhere in the world that I've ever seen, certainly historically not like any in this country before. And they're being shipped to strategic points around this country. And crime is escalating, and many of them, according to Brian's co-host, J.J. Carell, who's a former border agent, have ties to terrorist organizations. Well, this is a war. I mean, it's almost a conventional land invasion, right? And so as Ed Dowd says, just wait 5 years. The population of Americans that got the injection are going to be sick or disabled or dead. And there's I hate to say it because it's so politicized, but a replacement population that's robust. Look at the people coming over the border. They're not just fighting age, they're reproductive age. Fighting age men, reproductive age women in perfect health. I've been in refugee communities around the world. There are always old people, disabled people, people in wheelchairs, many, many babies. You're not seeing that coming over the border. You're seeing people being deployed to remake America. And I've also found, and other people have confirmed this, a 3-country staging area funded by the UN, Peter Hotez's friends, and our State Department, designed to support and facilitate this migration across our border of these very healthy people who are not being injected. And so there's a war on the West, there's a war on the United States, and the globalists' plan is to not have a superpower that is the United States of America, and to not have Western Europe with our troublesome ideals, or at least Britain's and Europe's former ideals, our current ideals, struggling of freedom of speech, constitutional rights, rule of law. That's being written into the past, even as we speak.
Do either of you have an opinion on this so-called pilot of vaccine ID card, speaking of Europe, that the EU is contemplating?
Yes. So the EU developed a vaccine passport during COVID. It didn't really get picked up very much. They transferred it to the WHO last year. The WHO has been pushing that out in the third world. And now a small organization has been hired to sort of roll out of course, it has a new name, the vaccine card, in 5 nations as a pilot program to try to make people think this is something good for them. And instead of imposing it, suggesting that as they travel from country to country, this one card, this one electronic, vaccine passport will help them, get across borders in the event of any infectious disease. The thing is, as I was looking into this organization, it looks like it's a bunch of young kids. They've gotten about $13 million. It's not really enough to roll out a big program, but it probably looks like a benign organization. And, some people will go along with it. I think that, it's a test. If they manage to actually release a bird flu that suddenly transmits person to person and causes severe disease, the current version doesn't do either. But if they release something that does, because you can make it, what's his name? Former head of the CDC, Robert Redfield, said he could make it in the lab in weeks to months. I think it'd be very easy.
Yep.
If that is released, then they're definitely going to come up with a vaccine. And what will be the purpose of the virus and the vaccine? More control. I don't know who's in charge. When we say it's all the Chinese, yes, the Chinese may have something to do with it, but it was the Americans that imposed COVID restrictions on us. It was the Americans that developed the vaccines. It was the Americans that mandated them. So, there are a lot of people involved. This is a very lucrative enterprise. The biodefense enterprise has been worth, many, many, many billions of dollars, probably $1 trillion. And so people like Jeremy Farrar, the chief scientist at WHO, have been in this field for at least the last 20 years, pushing out fear of bird flu. Creating the organization with Bill Gates that promises to make new vaccines in 100 days. And he is also the person who overdosed subjects in the 2 major trials with too much hydroxychloroquine in order to keep the pandemic going until a vaccine could come out. So this guy, he's also the co-discoverer of bird flu in 2003. In Vietnam. He published a New England Journal article on this bird flu, H5N1, in 2004. So Jeremy Farrar, he's also the guy who Fauci used to cover up the origin of COVID. He got that whole phone call together, got the article Proximal Origins of COVID published. Anyway, so he's really
In Nature.
central to this. Yes, in Nature. He tried to get it into Nature.
article.
They wouldn't take it in Nature, and then he got it into Nature Medicine.
Interesting. I thought it was in the main journal. I'd heard recently Nature
Okay.
Medicine, all through the early parts of the pandemic, it was just Nature. I'm going to have you comment, Naomi, as well, but I just want to say, I want to, again, fall on my sword a little bit about something that I've had to adjust course on. I was one of these people that when the Patriot Act came along, I was like, well, what's the big deal? I got nothing to hide. If they want to look into my whatever, fine, look at whatever. COVID, unfortunately, taught me that you give governments any power, any authority, oh my God. You will rue the day. I don't care what it is. And so when I look at a card and stuff like this, that wouldn't have bothered me 10 years ago. Now it's like, nope, not more. But Naomi, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say what Dr. Nass spelled out is really important for us to wrap our brains around. The fact that it is, in my view, China, and she's exactly right. It's also the United States, which honestly, makes my head explode when people point out how much collusion by how many people in our own government aligned with China and the globalists to roll this out. So I guess what I really want to stress is we're in a time of warfare that's so nefarious. We have to imagine what she's describing, which is, she describes it really well, a biomedical / biodefense / governance nexus floating around above our heads around the world that is trying to solidify a control grid above everything we think we understand, above nation states, above treaties, above, normal boundaries and borders. That's what's happening. And thank heavens for your knowledge base, Dr. Nass, because it's hard. This has never happened before in the history of the world. So it's hard for people, including me, to kind of go, oh my God, it's a whole grid and it's happening because it's so lucrative and it's happening it's hovering above everything we think of as our institutions, in which, people who are enemies on paper can be allies in making buckets of money by trafficking the bodies of people in all of their countries.
Yes,
The blob.
exactly. I mean, that's how all the countries did the lockdowns together and restricted the hydroxychloroquine and the ivermectin together. That only happens if you have some entity that is above all of our national governments and is giving them orders. And one of the ways that they can carry this out is because there's so many young global leaders who were heads of state as when COVID occurred. Most of them have been thrown out. Macron's still there. But, they were trained for this, to obey and to carry out their orders. So the World Economic Forum has been, I don't think they're the people sitting on top, but they're a mechanism by which multinations can all act together at the same time against their own people.
Right.
Yeah, Macron is still there, but keep an eye on France. It's a lesson in how people take power nefariously, and it's not him. He's the one trying to navigate it right now. So I actually support him now. So, but be that as it may, normally it takes your husband, Brian, Naomi, to upset me and make me depressed and get me to the emotional space I'm in right now after talking to the two of you. But here we are again. Susan, anything? I see you reaching for your microphone.
We wanted Brian, but we couldn't fit him on that tri-pick.
We got a big dose of Brian through Naomi. Trust me, it came right on through.
No, sorry, I was just going to say on a happier note, there's such nefarious forces arrayed against us, but millions of people resisting has really held them at bay a lot better than one would have thought, better than I predicted 2 years ago. Wouldn't you say, Dr. Nass? People like you and your colleagues.
I think that's true. Because what they are trying to do is so abhorrent to everyone that the only way they can bring it forward is basically under cover of darkness. And once we start exposing it, so my organization is now focusing on the attack on food and agriculture, because that's nobody wants there to be less food. And nobody wants the food to be poisoned or filled with messenger RNA or anything else. So it's just a question of exposing it, and then everyone agrees, and they can't really get away with it. The UN is trying to put forward this Pact for the Future, which is not a treaty, but it is a sort of a framework document that they'll get all the countries probably to agree with. It's very non-specific. We want to end poverty. We want to end hunger. We all want to work together. We're going to give lots of money to make the planet cooler, and everybody sing Kumbaya. And then based on that, governments will probably try and enact laws or policies that will be very restrictive, and we will expose them and where they came from, that this is a UN thing. And just because you have a delegate at the UN who, went along with this doesn't mean your nation goes along with it.
Right.
What we were able to do with the WHO was to get 22 attorneys general, 24 governors, and the legislatures of 2 states to all say no. Our state has sovereignty over health, and according to the Constitution, and we are not going to obey any orders coming down from the WHO. And I think that was one of the central ways we were able to stop them, because the rest of the world looked and said, wait a minute, the United States is pushing this, but now they're not going to even obey. Why should we? What is this?
Well,
so I think we can do it
human
again.
The human instinct for freedom and liberty goes, it's eternal. The Egyptians, William Wallace, Statue of Liberty sits outside the harbor, and it's the French. It's just a thing in humans. And so, if you are a freedom-loving individual, of which there are always many, you must fight for it. And we went through a period where we forgot that we have to always fight for it, because forces array that want to, for reasons that are hard to really understand, frankly, they want to diminish it and squash it. And thankfully, in this country, we have the genius of the system that our founding fathers put together, and amongst that is the state system, which is proving to be a very, very resilient part of how we resist this kind of thing. I appreciate you both being here. DoorToFreedom.org for Dr. Nass, also at Nass Meryl on X. Naomi R. Wolf on as well as daily, that's on X, as well as dailyclout.io. This has been really interesting. You've gaffed me in again, and I appreciate it, and have lined up some of my thinking, and I hope you've affected a lot of other people as well. I'm afraid these conversations will happen again in the future as this bird flu thing, whether it's H5N1 or what is it, H1N5? I don't know which one they're going for now. The various flus that are out there, they seem to be preoccupied with, which means they're monkeying with it, and so we will have other things to talk about in the future. Appreciate you both being here very, very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Drew.
Thank you, guys. For us, coming up, tomorrow is a noontime program. We'll let Caleb roll that up there. Batya, let's see if I can get the list up here. Yeah, Batya Angar-Sargam. She was on with me and Megan Kelly this morning, and she is terrific. And Jennifer Van Laar is coming in as well. Susan has her program with comedian Zhao Ying Summers. I'll let you talk about that in a second. Dr. Victory is going to be here on the 7th. We're going to be out that day on the 8th. I'm not sure who my guest will be, but Susan is having a transhumanism expert. Scott Adams comes in on the 12th. That'll be a special Monday show. And then on Tuesday, Jonathan Turley. A lot of stuff coming. September 5th, back to school with Salty Cracker. Just great guest coming. Great things. Lots of surprises lined up for you. Susan, you want to talk about your show for tomorrow?
Yeah, we're making a conscious connection with Zhao Ying Summers. She's a comedian, and she's going to go out like on a little speed dating event with
some poor soul.
3 people.
What is she going to do to that man?
Those men.
If you watch her Instagram, okay. So great. So that's at 3 o'clock. And do you want to talk about who's going to be there with you?
I'm sorry, what?
Who's going to be with you tomorrow besides Zhao Ying?
Tomorrow we have Psychic Rebel Colby, and that's it.
All right. So we appreciate y'all being here. Caleb, anything for you today? I know these episodes get you emotionally riled up as well as myself.
No, it's always just so great to hear from them. And it's also always funny whenever I go into the comments and people are attacking Dr. Nass. And I'm like, you obviously have not done 5 minutes of Googling this woman. She's been an expert in this stuff since before I was born.
Yeah.
What happened?
And let me say it again.
She may be saving your life.
I've said it in front of her many, many times, and I want you to understand this. Because I was training in undergraduate programs in New England at that time. And the people that got into MIT and the biological training they got was exceptional. They don't train people like that. People with postgraduate programs are required to get the kind of rigor that was done back in those days. I saw it. I was subjected to it myself to a certain extent. There was a lot going on. And on top of that, if you went to MIT or Caltech in the 70s, which she did, you did not get into medical school because they had grade deflation at those institutions. So you had to, the fact that you were able to get into medical school after being at MIT ACT then, at that period of history, means that you were the top in an extraordinary rarefied group. So that's who Meryl Nass is. And then she has all these 40 years of experience as an internist, and so she's not to be taken lightly. And of course, Naomi, her record speaks for itself in terms of publications.
Intelligent women.
Yeah, it's just great to see a journalist doing journalism. That's really what Naomi does, is she investigates things and then reports on what she's finding. All right, so tomorrow, Bocce in here, we will be with you at noon Pacific time, and I will see you then. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.